to it. How's everybody doing?
I'm good.
Yeah?
Tired.
Tired? What are you tired from?
That 7 days of painting killed me.
I thought it was supposed to take 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
You said it was a three-story house?
3-story house, and he was busy doing repairs and shit, and I was doing the painting. So it was just me by myself. I put a single coat on everything and cut everything in once. I do what I call a heavy cut, where I lay the paint on pretty heavy. So it's not really necessary to do a second coat, just touch-ups here and there.
Well, I'm over here stirring crap between two rivals in the YouTube and Twitter world politically. But I did a debate with the one the other night, and he finally he shared the stream, and he's got to edit down and cut it down, and it went pretty well. I was tapping him on almost everything. I had the wrong stat level for cancer. My brain was mixing up the number of cancer deaths with the number of drug-induced deaths. But at any rate, other than that, it was pretty good. Aaron, will you give me a fork? So, what do you guys want to get into today?
I've got some
editing my paper, and that's probably what I'll be doing on the screen here. Let me share my screen.
From Andrea Ziz. He's had a look.
You got a message, you said?
He's had a look at chapter 2 that I put on the folder. That's describing issues I have with early assumptions made in electrodynamics. And his response is, I'm working on getting the ideas properly organized for oh no, that was my response. Thanks for your text on the nature of things. There's a lot of material here. We need to think about this with some care. I hope you will be able to publish it. So yeah, I knew I got his interest early on when I talked to him on Skype. And the end result of it, of course, was I'm questioning the assumption that Ampere made in how electricity and magnetism interact, and then had issues with the Millikan oil drop experiment because it's never actually measured the charge of a proton. It's measured the electric negative and electric positive charges for electrons, but not anything.
You can see here on screen the folder. Which document is it that you're talking about?
It's chapter 2, the bottom one.
Classic physics. Okay.
Classic physics, yes.
Okay. What page?
Well, it's the entire document.
Well, we can't do the entire document for this morning.
So it's for those that want to read that. I cover issues with education. How did the corruption occur in science or society, really? Then I get into the oil drop experiment, Ampere's explanation and why I think it's wrong. And then after that, we talk about the fact that all matter we are aware of has electric and magnetic properties. Therefore, phenomena involving weather must be an electric phenomenon. Phenomena involving lava has to be an electric phenomenon. I suspect that the reason why the Earth rotates the rate it does is because of the fact that Earth is enclosed in an ionosphere that's rotating 3 times faster than the body inside. And the result of that is it will actually drag the planet into rotation in the direction that the ionosphere rotates. And if we look at Venus, for example, it's developing an ionosphere that is rotating in the same direction that Earth does. And the impact on Venus is its retrograde spin is slowing down. So I would expect that it will finally go prograde and start spinning in the same direction as all the planets in the solar system appear to do. Dynamics of what's actually happening in the sun's atmosphere and in the coma determines its orbital spin period of 28 days. But in the case of the gas giants like Jupiter and Saturn, their ionospheres rotate much faster. So something about the electrical discharges seems to slow down the rotation of the ionospheres in those cases. So I'm not really sure what the dynamics of that will be, but I'm convinced that that's how we get axial rotation to the planet. And if you develop an ionosphere, you will eventually develop an atmosphere, because the ionosphere precipitates upon the planetary body underneath. Chemistry is a nuclear reaction in all cases. So a chemical bond is formed by the formation of a neutron from an electron on one atom, the proton on another, and there's some photons, but it splits and creates a bonding mechanism. The neutron itself is where electromagnetic radiation is absorbed and expressed from. And the expression, when the neutron decays, and it emits photons at a lower frequency and electrons at a higher speed. So it's not the electron absorbs the EMR, it's actually a much more convoluted process, at least in my thinking. And some of this stuff has been verified. Unfortunately, the guys that are doing the verification don't want to talk too much about their successes. And then that, of course, rolls over into biology and how healing happens and all that sort of stuff. So there's a whole bunch of it. I had a look at that paper that was sent to us. I've had a couple of responses to it.
Yes, got your email. I'm looking at it now. It's looking like this entire section, the second section, is actually from Waldron himself, and so there's not much editing that I can actually do here. I'm looking through it though.
Yeah, I sent him an email with the promise to send him that chapter that we were just talking about next week, because I want him to try and knock me over in some respects. But I want him to think a bit about the Millikan experiment. The problem I have with this paper is he's relying on a single magic solution, and I don't think he really understands all the detail that's actually there. I mean, he's coming this from acupuncture and trying to figure out why it has the effect.
Yeah,
it's got
which is funny because that's like the backwards direction of where I came from, right? I approached acupuncture with electromagnetism instead of approaching electromagnetism with acupuncture. So I find it interesting.
But the thing is, at least it's trying to ask the right questions, I think. So you put your needles in the body and you have an impact, and the needles are metal and the environment's electrical and magnetic, and he's trying to figure out what the relationship between the environment, the needles, and the body are. And a lot of it is about, redirecting the energy flows in the body. So
yeah, but it's a long ways to go from there to everything. Every particle is the same size. They're all the size of the universe, and everything's touching all the time. That is
I think
long ways to go.
Waldron's off the chart, and it reminds me of a guy called Aspen, who thought that that all matter was basically a black hole and cubic and all sorts of weird stuff. And you see that in Nassim Haram's work as well, as the black hole is the universe type thing. And it isn't correct, I don't think, at all. But also it's relying on stuff we know to be wrong, like relativity and the speed of light is the speed limit of everything. None of that's true. So it leads. You can understand what they're trying to come to grips with, because the stuff they're dealing with doesn't explain the data they have. So they're hunting for a solution, trying to do it with the mainstream cosmological approach, which doesn't work. because, you know, gravity is the thing that causes nuclear fusion and so on, and it's just the wrong tack. But it all comes back to having come up with a speculation before you had the data and never going back after the data and checking whether your speculation still worked.
Right.
So, you know, I'm not saying that I'm dead right, because I've been told by the research groups, well, you got it right 2/3 of the time and wrong the other third, and they won't tell me which third I got right, or 2/3 I got right and the 1/3 I got wrong, which makes it a little bit hard to try and move forward.
Not all week for me to get out your paper and do another section. I got so many things going on. It's crazy.
No, it's okay. I mean, I need people to take time and digest, because it really does need a wholesale change. And I've been, you know, struggling with it for a year now, ever since desiring to rewrite it. There's a whole lot of bunch stuff in it that I need to take out. It's not actually right. So,
unfortunately, I really can't peer review all of Waldron's work too. I mean, it's not. Yeah, here we go. Back to a new section here. So.
I don't like Lorentz.
Look at her. He tried to derive the Lorentz force from his equation and failed.
Yeah, but the Lorentz force equation is also false. It's errored. I mean, I know it appears in electrical engineering and all the rest of it, but the maths we've been working on trying to figure out is that Lorentz and Poincare, or whoever it was doing the relativity, Riemann spaces, and
yeah,
that all that mathematics there is so complex that it's very easy to make a mistake, which is what Hilbert did when he was reading Schrodinger's work in 1916 before the guy died in the Great War.
I'm going to stop kicking the cabinets.
But, you know, a lot of people didn't realize that the mathematics that Einstein had in his paper was wrong, and it was based on earlier mathematics that had errors in it.
That's an important point I want to make for the audience. This is not a well-known fact, but Einstein had to republish general relativity several times with corrections made because people kept finding errors in his work, and he was caught doing a lot of hand waving. And historically, but by then he had already obtained this massive fame, and so no one, you know, they weren't going to kick him out of the scientific community. Apparently there's special treatment for some people and not for others who are obvious scientists like Houghton Arp or Emmanuel Velikovsky. And Einstein was constantly catching flack from the quantum mechanics community. They were at loggerheads for 30, 40 years. And they would go and look for problems. A lot of people in the scientific community were quite jealous of him. So he had a lot of rivals. And it's only now, 80 years later, it's not like he was walking Jesus at the time or the Buddha, where he goes, everyone was celebrating. Einstein had a lot of rivals, and they would find his problems and they would point them out. Then he would go back and he would change it and re-release the paper. And I don't know if that's a bad thing, but I am.
Well, it's actually a good thing.
Be surprised. I would say it's a good thing. I think just people would be surprised to know that it wasn't a work of grand eloquence that couldn't be touched. That's a falsity of history. That's memory hold kind of stuff like
even Einstein said in a number of cases, you know, if he had doubts as to whether his theory would stand up to the test of time himself. So, you know,
well, it hasn't. It hasn't. They keep saying it has, but it hasn't, as we covered in yesterday's video. Now that we have a so-called image or photo of a so-called black hole, and we don't see any of that, and it's covered in Dr. Edward Dowdy's book, that, you know, they've never found macro lensing beyond R = 1. So it's all to do with the plasma atmosphere of the sun or star, and it has nothing at all to do with gravity.
Correct.
Or planet.
However, However, you can bend light if you have an electromagnetic field structure
course.
that's powerful enough.
Of
So
course,
if you put a
because
laser
light's
beam through,
electromagnetic.
if you put a laser beam through a strong electromagnetic field structure, it will bend. And not only will it bend, the frequency of the light will change. So the gravitational explanation doesn't stand up. But we need to realize that the gravitational explanation and relativity in cosmology at the moment is that Arthur Eddington needed a method to keep his gas ball theory of the sun alive. Remember, when this came out, they were still trying to work out how come the sun could burn for the period of time it looked like it had burned. And we're talking about the Earth being, you know, maybe 1 billion years old or something, or the sun being 1 billion years old.
Hey, somebody throw another log on the sun.
Yeah, coal. It's driven by coal. So they had all sorts of issues, and E equals MC squared cleaned up a lot of the problems of where does the energy come from. However, Arthur Eddington was so locked into his model that he was prepared to pervert science in a lot of ways to keep his status. You know, he was the guy in charge of the Royal Astronomy in England, a lot of kudos and all the rest of it. And it's his efforts that really put Einstein center stage. And then, of course, he goes off in 1917 to do that work on the eclipse and basically pulls the walls over everybody's eyes, because his own team, when he did that, criticized the claim that it was light bending due to gravity, when they said, you know, this light bending can be just as easily explained through Newtonian optics, where light will bend through a medium, which is what Dowdy has proven with his research, but nobody's interested in hearing the truth. They're that welded pay packet wise to the existing paradigm. They're not prepared to accept the data.
Just for the audience, I'm going to again show on the Gateway Dowdy's page. You can buy his book on Amazon. It's a fantastic book. It's not expensive at all. There's his papers, and then here's it's supposed to be an animated gift that shows this, but there's several talks that he gave, simulations that he ran. Here's a paper, and there's another link directly to his book. And may the man rest in peace. It's really unfortunate that he passed away so young, but you know, his work is a work of really quite utter simplicity as compared to general relativity. And you know, it's algebraic for the vast majority of it.
And
so
it's
a lot easier to
standard
follow.
optics.
Yeah, it's all optics and algebra. So it's really a shame. I'm not going to sit here and say that the scientific community is racist or something. I think it's more that Einstein just has this special pedestal. But here it is right here. If velocity of light is only a tiny bit dependent on the velocity of the light source, then my whole theory of relativity and gravitation is false. So, you know, Einstein was admitting he could be wrong. You know, this isn't, you know, Jesus in scientific clothing.
Well, the thing we need to remember is the
Michelson-Morley.
Yeah, that lot. Their experiment did not prove that the aether did not exist, which is a claim that's made, and they also proved that
In
the
fact,
light.
I happen to have a search already up here. It's funny that you bring this up, because we had the first that I'm aware of quality vertical interferometer experiment that I'm been aware of here on YouTube. It's been up for over 12 years, and then now in that Russian documentary that Robitaille featured, then there's the second one, and if there's a third one that is quality. Look at what the mainstream pushes. This is hilarious. What's at the top? Oh, look, some cardboard. Look at all the cardboard experiments. Unbelievable. So
anyway,
you know,
getting back to that, what a lot of people are not aware of is that in 1939, I think it was, Bell Labs repeated that experiment and showed categorically that you could not determine spectrum drift in light sources based on source alone. In order to be able to do that, you needed to know what the photon emission rate was to determine whether there is any spectrum shift due to Doppler. And what Halton Arp did with his intrinsic redshift is he exposed, you know, the location of where the quasars were in relation to a parent galaxy. And myself and my colleague were discussing this in the relationship of what we thought was going on in terms of energy transfer that's occurring, where light can absorb energy direct from the aether or express it back out as all matter can. And in the end, what we said is a photon will redshift if it has a low quantity of constructive material in it. In other words, it can't just chuck stuff out, so its frequency drifts to the red. However, if the photon has lots of construction in it, it'll blue shift. The frequency will go up because it needs to modify its behavior to maintain stability. And in the process of trying to obtain what I call is constructional minimum energy, it will emit or chuck away or give away the extra aether that's in its structure and drift its spectrum away from the blue towards the red. But under certain circumstances, like if you expose it to an intense magnetic field where there's lots of aether, it can do the reverse. It can actually absorb the aether into the structure to survive that intense environment. And this happens in Jupiter's ionosphere. You'll find hydrogen 7, the hydrogen atom that has 7 nucleons in it. That's 1 proton and 7 neutrons. But if you take it away from that environment, that hydrogen atom will instantly transform into a different element. The neutrons will just explode and do all sorts of things. So you'll get the hydrogen will become something like lithium or boron or something along the first row, where you got the same number of nucleons. So the environment determines the stability of the construction. So if it's an intense energy environment, it's able to maintain that structure easier than if it's a low energy environment. And in a low energy environment, the constriction that's applied to the matter structure releases, and the matter structure just has to get rid of what it doesn't need. And it's a bit like, you know, Wal Thornwell's talking about trying to speed up the electron. And the electron gains mass as it goes faster and faster because it's going faster in the environment, it needs a more rigid structure. So it absorbs more and more material to become more and more rigid. But eventually, the structure suffers a concordance mechanism, and it just simply gives up and explodes. So in matter, you've got a concordance structure, a concordance effect where the object wants to go to, you know, a constructed state, and a discordance event structure. So that it's a war between these two opposites, and eventually these two things get out of balance with each other. One overpowers the other, and you get, you know, absorption of energy or explosion of energy, whichever way it happens to work. And it's inbuilt. All structure has this. It's resonance between the two polarities of that are driving the structure. So you've got clockwise and anti-clockwise motion. You've got forward and backward motion. You've got vibrational motions in 3 directions at least. You've got the interaction between negative and positive electric charge, north and south magnetic fields, hot and cold temperatures. All this stuff is a feature of the resonance structure itself that's like a solid flow. Is the best I can describe it. But that solid flow is stretched from the infinite past to the infinite future, which is why these structures, particularly electrons and protons, seem to last forever. They can lose construction elements, or they can gain construction elements. But there's no way you're ever going to detect that energy transfer using light photons, because light, the mechanism of transferring the energy from the environment to structure, is that mechanism actually builds a light photon or an EMR photon. So I can definitely am of the opinion that the photon, the electron and proton are all you need. And the light photon itself is a construction. It's a particle. It is not a wave. It just, if you have enough of these photons around, the photons will behave like water does. It'll produce wave-like behavior, or it'll also behave like water and travel in a conduit, which is a capacitance discharge mechanism where it's going from high potential to low potential. But that flow is bidirectional from the source and to the source. And we don't appreciate these things because they're not easily exposed. And if we wanted to take a picture of what's really going on, we have to have really good field cameras. You've got to be able to feel the electric field. You've got to be able to feel the magnetic field. So this idea that they've got to touch each other before they can interact is not really true. What you need is a charge that's within inside the field boundary of the other charge, so that these two see each other and they can interact. But the interaction is at three levels. It's at the etheric seed level, it's at the charge field level, and kinetic between when these two charges touch each other.
Could I ask a question, Robert? Is there an interface then between sort of hypersound and electrical, a magnetic field, or electromagnetics? Is there an interface between
sound?
Yeah, infrasound, hyper, any kind of sound wave. So the physical wave and the electrical one, basically.
Yeah, there is, and the reason why there is the sound is driven by a medium, which is electromagnetic, right? And that will interact electromagnetically with charge or photons or anything. So
right.
The thing that's common to all matter that we're aware of is there is a presence of something we call electric charge. There's something we call magnetic charge, and these two things are everywhere in matter. So if I have a vibration in a medium, I will see electrical and magnetic field fluctuations, and all the matter around it will respond to it because they have electrical and magnetic properties that will interact. So the only question is are there just two charges? And if we say that electricity generates a magnetic field, we can flip it around the other way and say, well, electricity is the byproduct of a magnetic charge. These two things, you can look at it both directions and produce all these interactions the same way. And the problem I had in my speculation is when I finally realized that was the case, you can't just rely on there just being one charge. It doesn't work because both have to exist for it to work.
I tend to agree, actually, because it's clear from just looking at things in the clinic. We're dealing with lots of different kinds of charge, not only the proton and the electron. There is something else there, and I guess we would just have to call it, for lack of any other good term available, we just have to call it the ethon. And then if that begs the question, and I think this is one of Robert's central tenets, if there is another charge like that, could there be other kind of charges beyond that? That would be relevant to discussing.
Yeah, you've got claims about subtle energy, which indicates a charge that you could call a subtle charge. Time itself behaves like a charge with past and future. Then you've got sex, which is male female. It's not exactly a charge, but the two have to work together. Good and evil, which is like an ethical charge. And the question is because these things express themselves in the real world, in our real experience, are they actually built into the actual structure that is the building block of everything? Because we know the universe is built up as a fractal conglomeration of smaller structure. And with fractals, if the seed has that behavior, then anything made from that seed will express that behavior at a different scale. which is why we see the sort of things we do. But cosmology doesn't want to admit that that's the case. And quantum physics, of course, haven't got a correct picture. And the reason why you can't join the two together is their foundations are wrong. But if you just apply an electromagnetic consequence of construction and allow these two things to be completely independent of each other, in other words, we have a characteristic in matter that is electrical and a different characteristic that's magnetic, and these two things are independent of each other, you can go from the scale of quantum to the scale of cosmological, and the thing will fit. Whereas if you do the gravitational model, it doesn't. You got breaks all over the place. First of all, you haven't married up electricity, electromagnetism with gravity, although they know there's something going on there. You've also got the issue to do with, how fast does the gravitational field move? Quantum, the mainstream say it's at the speed of light. Well, if it was at the speed of light, we wouldn't have a solar system. And there's been measures made in the 1800s that prove that the speed of gravity field is 9 times the speed of light. Or is it 10 to the 9, sorry? So you've got the speed of light, and then multiply that by 10 to the 9 to get the speed of gravity. And nobody wants to, go down this path. The mathematics they know is wrong, or they're ignorant of it being wrong. They just don't. They're not exposed to this stuff. And it's almost
I heard it was speed of the light squared. The next kind of fractal level of.
Oh no.
Well, no, it's just 10 to the 9 more, yeah.
The 9 for the gravity field. However, the skips at the speed of light are a prime number times that speed. So you got 1c, 2c, 3c, 5c, 7c, 11c, and so on up the prime number. Yeah, and between those prime numbers, all the speeds in between are possible for a matter structure of that type. So we're exposed to matter structure that we can easily see that's in the range 0 to 1c. And we're seeing effects that indicate that speeds of fields are way faster than the stuff that generates those fields. What's the speed of a what I call the seed particle, the chargino? You want to call it an etherion, whatever. That particle can transmit itself from one location in the universe to any other location in the universe instantly, which gives you the universal clock. There's an instant transfer of information between one location and another. What does that do to time? If our experience in life is actually in the quantum sense, and I think this one they got right, is that we lead a multitude of experiences based upon every possible decision that occurs to us in that period that we're alive for. How this all comes back together as a single unit at the end of it all, I don't know, but it would make a lot of sense. If the universe is trying to get the maximum experience it can achieve, then it has to experience every possible outcome that is ever possible, which would explain, God knowing everything, God being everywhere, God being able to do anything. If you got all that available to you and you're able to use it, well, that's amazingly powerful.
It would be if we get the opportunity, certainly. It'd be fantastic.
And we know that we're a composite of the universe, and the universe is a composite of us. Although we're unique to each other, we're part of each other.
Yeah, I can see that, yeah.
But the idea that, we're part of God and God's part of us is just given, which is one of the reasons why I think the universe structure itself, the structure of the aether, records everything that happens without exception. Yeah. It's just that to keep our heads, in our environment and not cause us too much confusion, we tend to condense this multi-spread environment down to our timeline that makes sense for us in this stream. And in some other version of history, the same discussion's going on, slightly changed. Or maybe exactly the same, except, the atoms aren't where they're supposed to be elsewhere in the universe. And it only takes one seed particle to be in a different location for a completely different history.
So does
Of course,
this postulate multiple universes then, or
Well-
infinite universes?
multi-universe is not the right. Multiverse is a logic error. We have the universe means one verse, one environment. What we have is an environment that allows multiple expressions of experience simultaneous to each other. And just like that Doctor Who's film where Dave Tennant was talking about the timey-wimey stuff, the big spaghetti ball of time, there are connection points where history lines converge to a point and then diverge from a point. But it also allows history to go backwards as well as forwards. So the future can cause the past, and the past can cause the future. It's a complex instruction, and it's not part of our normal experience. We don't see the universe behaving this way because it's too confusing for us.
Yeah, we're just privy to the 3D in front of us.
So
it is more of a holonomy. Yeah.
So we lock it down to something that we can handle. But if we had a different ability to see things, then maybe our perspective of what's going on would be completely changed. You know, if you listen to the guys that had those near-death experiences and they're in heaven and all the rest of it, they talk about experiences with other beings where all you have to do from one being to the other is just look at the other being and you know everything about that being. Everything they've done, everything they've experienced, there's just nothing hidden. And, you know, if that was real right now on this world, the planet would just go nuts. For a starter, we don't want everybody to know what, shit we've been up to. Because we'll get embarrassed by it or whatever. Suffer a consequence. We can't have a cosmology mechanism which doesn't deal with the spiritual and the material. The two things are so integrated that you can't separate them.
Yeah, I agree.
That's another mistake the mainstream science says, we can't let religion come into this because it's corrupting science. Well, science doesn't have a method of dealing with what it can't observe.
They've already made science into a religion, so that was a fallacy.
Well, yeah, there's that too. But it comes back to
they couldn't keep religion out if they wanted to.
Yeah, well, that's because of
really
the way we are. That's the way humans are. We get into a position where we're suddenly famous, and we don't want anybody to come up with something that shows that we're just a moron. That's the last thing we need to have. So we'll take steps to ensure that the real horrible stuff never comes out.
Well, they tied science to religion with the Big Bang Theory. Correct.
They ended the Enlightenment. That's when we can definitively say the Enlightenment ended, was 1927.
Lemaitre, it was a big fan of relativity, stated that the reason why he was following the path that he was because he was trying to prove that God rules the world. And that's not he had a belief system that he was trying to
a priori assumption, just for the audience to be clear. That's pseudoscientific. I'd like to refer people. There's two places for EPMC. You go to the standards page on the home at epmcgateway.com. I'll put a link in the description. And we have here a list of the things that you need to do. Okay. And then if you want a definition of pseudoscience, if you go to the volunteer page, it's right down here. Okay. Pseudoscience cannot be proven or disproven, usually relies on a priori knowledge, models as truth, math as God, and the authoritarian fallacy. Yes. All right. And then unfortunately, I'm a man of faith. So the Bible for me is an authority of matters of faith. But in science, strictly speaking, it is not an authority. It is, however, an excellent place to find evidence for your EPMC research. So I encourage you to do so. The Psalms are full of references. We have an entire Psalms that we've already identified for sure are talking about induced thunderbolt powers. And so I encourage people to look. Yeah, Genesis is fantastic too.
Yeah, it's the
all that Old
opening light.
Testament stuff
Let there
is
be
full of
light.
but
When
but,
I-
that,
I
but we
came-
don't rely on it as an authority. So that's
Yeah.
the problem that the creationists have, is that they turn to Genesis as a but now the cool thing, and I have a whole paper about this, is that Big Bang is not a real cosmology. Creationism is a better cosmology than Big Bang, because Big Bang
Well,
does
it's
not
the same.
do what we need it to in order to be a cosmology, which it doesn't explain anything about the modern world. It doesn't explain any of it.
Yeah.
They only in
No,
matter
especially-
in small matter. They don't deal at all in the actual, like, how things work around you, why things are the way they are. There's no cosmogony to it. The only cosmogony they have has been proven time and again to fail. Accretion does not work, and I have a paper on that as well. So just so people are aware, when they go to do their own research, let's stick to science. And now you can do metaphysics and you can do philosophy. Just clearly mark what you're doing. That's all. Just clearly mark that you're doing.
Thing that I'm
know.
going to say about a priori knowledge, it's knowing what it is you're looking at before you start, and there's post. A priori, and I forget what the
Yeah, and there's a difference between making a prediction and
Yeah.
saying you already have the answer. Lord Kelvin said he already had the answer, and Heaviside said, "No, you're wrong," and he didn't like that very much. And the same
No.
thing happened again. I forget the bloke from Harvard, and then Hubble won, and the guy stewed on it for 20 years, and then came along and ruined Velikovsky's life. So it's a serious issue. This a priori. I'm not putting it on there for no reason. It's a real serious problem, and
but
I just wish people would read more Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
It's two types of two ways of arriving at knowledge. One is empirical, based upon the evidence, and one is based upon assumption. Right? And science is an argument between these two things. We see something, we make a speculation as to how it's going to work. That's an assumption. So it's a subjective view of what we see. Whereas we have the objective view, which is the experiment. Now, these two things have to match. You can't just create knowledge from the experiment alone, nor can you create knowledge from the speculation alone. The two have to go together. And one's got to reinforce the other. And if we fail to do that, we come up with the wrong answer. And if we go ahead and create our rules about how things are going without actually observing what's there and knowing that it's there in the first place, if we discover let's say tomorrow we find time particles, just for example, then all our theories have to be redone to explain why it is we don't generally see the time particle, and what impact does that have on our understanding of how the behavior works, and what is the impact that occurs therefore to the mathematics, because mathematics comes from a description of the behavior, not the other way around. People that are going out there claiming that the universe follows mathematical rules don't understand that the universe never went to mathematics college. It didn't do any mathematics learning at all.
Agreed.
It's a state machine that these are the conditions, and when these conditions occur, I'm going to go to a different state, and it's automatic. And you need to know how to change the conditions to stop that transfer from occurring in the first place. The mathematics is just a description of how I get from A to B, and that's all it does. It doesn't drive the process in any way at all. It's just
You can't break the mathematics.
It's a tool.
It's a tool to describe what's occurring. It's not a tool that manages what occurs. And a lot of mathematicians out there, I'm sorry to say this, guys, but you don't have the skills to do the job you claim to do. Right? Because I can chuck at you, some of the esoteric maths, and you're struggling to find it. I've been told, this was in the mathematics guy, there's a group of mathematics in a mathematics branch in a university, and they're all come along each week to a seminar, and one of the guys gets up and does their maths. Anyway, this guy stands up and starts doing his maths on the board within 2 seconds. The rest of these highly paid, skilled mathematicians had no idea what he was doing. They couldn't understand what he was doing. So if the mathematicians can't understand each other, what hope have the rest of us got?
Well, I
I'll
mean,
leave
that's
you guys
that's
to talk.
the point. It's not a language of God. It's an engineered tool. Now he was clearly fluent in the symbolic language of mathematics, but not everybody actually is. I'm certainly not. I have a math minor, but it was a lot of work for me to and I didn't want to continue beyond, the levels of calculus that I had gone through, and all the matrix. I had enough, and it's just some people they're more versed. They start at a younger age, perhaps, or maybe their brains just work that way, and they can read the language. However, anyone can engineer their own mathematics, and you don't have to be fluent in that language, but you'll always be limited if you don't already have that as a kind of a talent. You can get a lot better with it, but there's just some people who are naturally gifted in that way. And there's nothing wrong with that.
There are a
It doesn't
number
mean
of
they understand
different
the universe.
notations
It doesn't mean they
for the
understand the
different
universe any
areas of
better
maths,
than you.
aren't there?
Yeah, they may not understand anything better than anyone else. Some of them can't even manage their own wallets, and of course, finances is all mathematics. So, anyways, just thought I'd make that point. Just letting people see here that this paper is getting closer and closer, edging closer and closer. Of course, then I have to go back and actually do some Googling and inserting into the footnote what the actual citation is. It's like carrying the term here. I'll continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Now, Ramon has given me some flack over those postings of those light bulbs.
I haven't given you flack. I haven't begun to give flack myself.
Well, the observation I will make is that we can build those circuits. Like, it's not that hard.
You're talking about the chat. I was wondering if we were going to talk about this. I wasn't giving you. I was giving the video flack. I'm in agreement with Garrett. That it's an electrical. It's an extraordinary claim. So I would like to see extraordinary.
Yeah, but the observation I will make, which I got slammed on, was that the magnetic ring that he puts in there completes the circuit. And the reason why I can say that is
I use my feather glove. I use my feather gloves on you. I promise. If you listen
to
that,
I'm just going to
debate with liberal clock, you go, man.
It's fine, but I'm just going to cause you to observe something that occurred. Right? He's got this wooden block, and he's got his wires wrapped around a bolt that are connected to the LED light and all the rest of it. That light only switched on. That light only switched on when he inserted the magnet under the.
He couldn't have a friend there. He couldn't have a third hand involved.
Well, I reckon for less than $50 we can build that. All I've got to do is go and get a bloody light socket to wire up to the whole thing. And if I can get that thing to work without anything else.
The point of those kinds of videos are to gather views, because there are a lot of people interested in Tesla and in free generation. So this is the kind of bulb that was used, and then the guy steps through how to do it. I don't want to get a copyright strike, so we're going to skip through a lot of stuff. He builds these. So this is the key point. There is no connection from this end to this end of the circuit.
Yes,
they can agree. Okay, we can all agree to there. At any moment when he does a cut, of course, he could have inserted a battery. He shows the battery. He shows that there's no battery here in the middle of the video, but from there on, he could have theoretically inserted a battery.
Well,
so now
the problem I have with it,
he inserts the bulb. Okay, now this is the key diagram, people. There's no circuit connection between the two, so the bulb is not on. When he then puts in, you can see here when he puts in this magnet, his hand is in the front. I noticed that he's holding it in the strange way that magicians hold things. Magicians love people who do prestidigitatorium and lose they always hold their hands in very interesting ways. So I'm just noticing how he's holding his left hand. So I'm looking at the body language. He inserts this magnet, and it for sure turns on. I mean, I don't think it's Photoshop. You never know these days. I mean, we have deepfake technology, so you never know. He does it again. Right? He very carefully, just like a trained magician, he shows you that it's not there, and then he pushes it in. He's got both hands, and boom, it's on. Now, what I'm maintaining is that, yeah, if he doesn't have it secretly wired with, you know, an editing trick, that if this really is a flat, you know, green, that he could be using an electric field. So
Okay.
you got to
Observation.
reproduce the entire experiment, even with the.
Yeah, observation. Has he shown you all the detail he claims that's causing this to occur?
I think he's hiding
Can
stuff.
you go away? Can you go away and build this device as he's shown it? That's the first question.
You can build what's been shown, but I don't know if you can build what he has or
Now,
not.
the question here is, for the ring magnet, what does the magnetic field do?
Well, I mean, that is a big question.
make-
Let's get away from the video, because you said you're going to reproduce this, so we'll hang a feather in there or whatever.
He will
But
explain.
hold on. But what we can do is have a discussion about permanent magnets and edge currents, and I'd love to have this discussion. Let's do that.
In that ring magnet, if that is a ring magnet and it's not all bullshit, what you have in that ring magnet is a circular electrical flow in the material. We've got electrical energy rotating in the magnet.
Sure, you've got Robert Desinti also shows that, yes. But the small currents.
Under those circumstances, we've got an electrical field that's in rotation.
It would be a permanent. It would be direct current, because the currents would continuously flow in the same direction.
The light can work with AC or DC. It doesn't care, and it can
No,
work
the
with
light doesn't care. The light doesn't care. We're only talking about the inductive current.
So what we know is there is a circular rotation of electrical field, right? And we've got two antennas at opposite sides, and the electric field on opposite sides to that magnet are going in the opposite direction. So there's an oscillation mechanism kicking in, and you've got two antennas that are picking up the electric.
Now you're jumping, because we have. Let's presume that we have an edge current circulating this way and an edge current circulating this way. So you have a differential, but the differential is constantly circulating in the same direction. So where is the
direction? What's the direction of the electric field on the far side versus the close side?
Well, we wouldn't know that, but we're arbitrarily setting one to be going in the clockwise, one to be going the counterclockwise.
But what I can say is that as far as the two metal bolts are concerned, the field on the far side is going in one direction, but on the near side, it's the opposite direction.
But it's not changing, is my point.
But you've got a circulation.
Permanent magnet is your source of edge current. It's not changing in field.
Anyway,
it's permanent
why
field.
bother? Right, this is not the only example of this sort of behavior. Why bother putting these videos out there in the first place if they can be so easily?
Because it pays money. This clicks gets money. Clicks equals money.
Okay, that's fine, but this experiment can be duplicated by anybody who's got access.
This guy doesn't care. Okay, look at this. 107,000 up views, 17,000 down views. That's 120,000 likes, almost 8 million views. I mean, this has gone up 10,000 times since I saw it yesterday.
I don't care who's clicked on it and who's watched it. That's not and how much money he happens to get out of it. What I'm interested in is the claim that this is a fake. And if it's a fake,
okay, then prove it isn't, because it's an extraordinary claim. I report it as a fraud because I think it's absolutely a fraud.
Well, I don't think you did the right thing, because the right thing to do is to build this device, which looks like it'll cost maybe $100.
Okay,
right?
$100. No, this right here should be a $25 experiment.
Yeah, well, the magnet is what's
expensive. Wire is the most expensive stuff.
Yeah, the magnet is what's expensive here, but
maybe you're probably right.
If you can't do this with less than $100 or 50 pounds, you can prove this. You don't have to go and say it's a fake. You can build one of these things yourself. Anybody can do it.
Well,
there it is. It's
for this stuff. So I'm relying upon things that I actually have done, and there's nothing connecting the loop of the circuit. That's what I'm saying. Even
if we haven't duplicated the experiment, we can't say it's shit. I'm sorry.
No, I didn't say that it's definitely that. I said that there's no electric circuit. There's no electric circuit.
All I think that'll happen is it'll induce a magnetic.
You have an electric circuit
into the.
Yeah, but you can induce it when you insert it. But when it stays there and there's no changing magnetic field, it's not rotating, it's not moving.
No, that's not true.
No electric.
That magnet,
well, then you have to prove that because
that magnet is producing, regardless of whether it's in the circuit or not, a circular rotating electric and magnetic complex. The magnet itself does that.
this, okay,
What?
I'm going to tell you right now, when you have this ring magnet underneath a, what are those called? The ferromagnetism detector, the paper, the sheet, the green magnetic field. You're not going to see a change in magnetic field. It's static.
Build this thing.
Magnets don't flow. That is a misnomer of that. It may be Maxwell's fault. I don't know whose fault it is. Magnets don't flow.
Forget that stuff, right? Build this bloody thing, put the magnet in, and stick the whole thing.
You volunteered. I'm busy.
Yeah, well, I need to build
volunteered.
a Faraday cage. I need to stick this thing inside a Faraday cage. And that way, if this is being all, jiggery pokery with a Tesla coil, it won't show through.
I would love if you did put the full 1 hour video. You can. I trust you to make the little induction bolts and all that stuff, and then show all the wiring. Prove the bottom. Use plastic instead of wood, so nobody thinks you carved it out and put a battery. Which is another option here, people, is that he could have easily in between cuts put a what would it be, a 12-volt battery underneath of here, change the wiring where you can't see it, and then when the magnet passes over a solenoid, it switches the battery on and turns this. That's most likely the right explanation. It could also be the electric field.
But what you got there is a construct that has electromagnetic structure throughout the entire thing. The wood, the light, the bulb holder, the wires, the magnet, it's all electromagnetic structure.
All right.
And
do you really think no one ever tried anything like this before, though? Do you really think no one ever took a ring magnet and said, this ring magnet is full of energy? Why shouldn't we be able to get, free energy out of this?
I posted that guy who did the accumulator, the 7-thing accumulator.
Yeah, 4 pounds for a high temperature ring magnet.
Yeah.
There you go. So it's not that expensive an experiment.
You could do it for less than 50 quid.
I'd say easily. If you wait till next year, me and the kids will do it as part of their science, or even over the Christmas break.
Me is I see the
science class.
My colleagues
I've got most of the stuff. I just don't have the same exact bulb and I have to order a ring magnet.
Well, I've got ring magnets.
I've got all the rest of the stuff. I just don't have the main 3 components.
You go to the hardware store and pick up those little ring magnets that you use to put shelves up with.
I need to pick up more natural gas and a new toilet lid and all that kind of stuff. So I hate going to Lowe's. It's because my father used to spend, to do a 2-hour paint job, it'd take you 4 hours at the Lowe's and you'd go visit it 3 times. And so I put it out and I only go like twice a year.
Yeah. But anyway, it just happens that my colleague has bought all these magnets. I've got a neodymium magnet.
You have no reason not to do it.
Yeah, so I've got little rings.
Tell you what, you do that.
The only thing I would have to get is because they're those little eyelet magnets that you put a screw in to fix up a shelf with. I've got those ones, the ones that are about 5 mils across with a tiny hole in the middle. But anyway, I'd have to build using those.
Now, if this proves out, if it doesn't work, does it invalidate your nature of things? Number one. Number two, if it does work, what does it prove?
Reinforces what I say.
What does it reinforce?
Well, what it means is that when we're talking about electrical behavior, we're actually talking about electrical and magnetic behavior at the same time. If if the ring magnet is actually a circulating field structure, it will drive.
It is a circulating field structure, but it's not an alternating current.
Yes, it is.
It's a rotational current, but it's not alternating.
Yeah, but for the 2 pieces of wire that are sitting there, acting as antenna, one for one, the field is going away from the light, and the other one, it's into the light. They're going in opposite.
Picks up electrical.
That light does not require AC to operate. It can operate under DC.
Yeah, well, okay, fine, but but have induction. You need to still have it, but it's fair enough. So you're maintaining that there is a magnetic signal.
circulation. Well,
Huh?
the magnet has got dynamic,
People
magnetic,
understand, 'cause not
and
everybody's.
electrical behavior.
Hold on 1 second. Antenna signals, electric or magnetic. What you're really maintaining is that it's voltage across the antenna elements and the current create then the electric and magnetic waves respectively. Hold on, antenna 101. You're maintaining that the magnetic field is sending out electric signal.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What
Okay.
I'm saying is the ring magnet is a structure that promotes circular field rotation of both electrical and magnetic properties in the magnet and near its edge within a certain distance of the magnet.
And you're not
If you
asserting
spin
that
it,
it's,
if you
what it's
spin
got
the magnet,
And what is
you're not asserting that it's creating an induction.
no induction? Faraday's induction is
Yeah.
not correct, right?
Okay.
What you've got
So,
is a
here's
magnet.
another thing. Here's another
What
thing.
you have-
So in signals engineering, you have quarter wave antenna.
Whatever.
So how would he know? How would he know how long to make this antenna?
Get back to the basics, right? What we have is a magnet that's made out of matter that has electric and magnetic properties. We have wire that is made out of matter that has electric and magnetic properties. Now, if the magnet structure is such that you're getting a circulation through the magnet, within a certain distance of that magnet, the field will be rotating, both the electric and magnetic field. Above it, you've got matter that will respond electrically and magnetically at the same time to what's happening in the magnet. And that's what's driving this thing.
Well, this is a big. This
I
is
can go and
good.
get your fluoro example where you had that, whatever it was, covered with tinfoil. I can go and get my fluoro lamp. I can walk under a 22,000 kVA power line and it will turn on without connecting to anything.
I'll put
You know,
I'll put the link to that video in the description of this
Right.
video.
But fundamentally, what we need to understand is the idea that an electric current produces a magnetic field is not correct.
Mhm.
What we have is a feature that's electric and a feature that is magnetic, and these two are not cross-generating each other. They occur
Okay,
simultaneously.
let me ask you this. When man and woman get married, are they one?
No,
They're not.
no, they're not.
Okay, so
They're
are
individual, but you don't.
are you married?
If you want to have
Are you-
human
hold on,
being
this
babies,
is a personal question. Are you married?
yeah, I am. But
Okay,
I'll tell
all
you right now,
If you
without-
hold on, let me ask you. I'm asking you a series of questions here. When she's unhappy, do you feel it?
you're asking the wrong set of questions.
No, I'm not asking the wrong questions. I'm asking you.
What you're trying to do is what we have.
Let me ask you a series of questions.
Marriage is a combination of two individuals who respond to each other in
But you
sympathetic
earlier
way.
said that sex is charged. So we're going to stick with your own schema. So the
Yeah,
nature.
that's fine. However,
Hold on,
with sex,
hold
with
on,
sex,
Robert. Hold on,
is
Robert.
babies.
Hold
Sex
on.
produces babies.
Hold on. If you can feel that she is unhappy without having spoken any words or looked at her, if you can really feel it, even across distances, then the Bible is correct. Then you have become one, and it is a mystery, is what the Bible says.
No,
It is
what you've
a
become
mystery.
is linked.
Okay, fair. You're a circuit. Either way, you've become
Become a
one.
circuit.
Circuit is a
Yeah,
loop.
but
Loop is
however-
one. The
however-
zero is one. If you look at the zero, it's one. That's the thing. That's one of the biggest secrets of alchemy. The zero is a one. It's a unity, right? There's
Yeah,
one
come
loop,
back to
continuous
this.
loop.
Come back to this. You do not get an offspring, a baby, if it's just two guys and two girls. If it's a guy and a guy and a girl and a girl, you do not get a baby. You need to have a guy and a girl to get a baby.
Okay, we all agree there. This is a science channel, so we all agree
So
there.
let's get the fundamentals correct. However,
Yeah,
what we've got,
that is the
what we've
fundamental.
got-
We're talking about the fundamentals. So
Yeah.
if electromagnetism
What
is
you've got-
literally one,
you've got
if
a
it's
human
literally
TV set.
one, if electromagnetism is literally one, then you don't have the two. But if it's two that is a mystery as one, you don't need there to be there isn't a problem with having magnetism that generates electricity or electricity that generates magnetism. And I think that you are creating that problem because you have a personal problem with Faraday or something.
No,
And I don't agree with that because
I
the
don't have a
math
personal-
shows that magnetism follows hold on. Magnetism follows the electricity.
If the
By
maths,
And that's the
description, the issue here is the description correct that generates the maths? Now, my comment with Maxwell's equations and all the rest of this stuff is there are circumstances where the maths doesn't agree with what is observed. It does not support.
Faraday's experiment is faulty for some reason. Are you saying that
on
Faraday?
An assumption. Faraday's assumptions for induction requires the acceptance of Ampere's assumption that a moving electric charge produces a magnetic field. And I'm asking the question, how the hell do we prove the assumption? If the assumption is wrong, if the assumption is wrong,
let me direct people. If they go to the PMC tab and they go to EU General and then they go to engines, there is a video here on the Faraday motor, or you can do a search for the Faraday motor. Okay, so the Faraday motor, you can explain to people if you want how it works, and then you tell people why you think that the description of why it works is wrong. Okay, let them know how it's supposed to work.
The claim by mainstream science is that we have an electrical flow occurring,
right,
which is generating generating a magnetic field that is in motion. So we've got flowing electrons causing a rotating magnetic field that interacts with a magnet, and the thing goes round and round and round, right? What we ignore in our explanation of what's going on is we have electrons that are moving, and those electrons express a unipolar electric charge and a dipolar magnetic feature. It is not just electrical. It's two things. Now, I can produce the unipolar.
However, one is 90 degrees out of phase with the other.
That's fine. Nothing says that these things have to line up. However,
and free-flowing man and wife don't.
Well, they line up enough to create babies.
Yeah, the engine works sometimes.
Right. So the issue here is there is an assumption that we cannot prove. We can't go and get matter that's only electrical and nothing else. It doesn't. We have never found it. Nor can we create it. Nor can we get matter that's only magnetic and nothing else. Right? We can't get magnetic matter and electrical matter and move these things in relation to each other and prove the assumption that a moving electric field produces a magnetic response.
For Big Bang people, we are in agreement here. You cannot have a gravitic sun doing fusion, producing magnetism, and there's no electricity. That's not possible. That's lies of the mainstream. It's fake news. It's been fake news for over 100 years. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a basic assumption made by Ampere, absent of the fact that that in the stuff he was observing were atoms that were made up of electrons and protons and hybrid constructions involving photons and electrons and protons, right? Ampere did not know what the structure of the material he was playing around with actually was. So he's trying to explain why a magnetic needle moves when he discharges a battery, and why if I move a magnet I get an electrical response, right? And he's made a speculation as to what's going on without any evidence that he can produce that proves that a speculation holds, right? So he has an opinion about what is going on, and he's got evidence that happens to line up with it. But the question is the opinion correct? How do we prove that a moving electrical structure that has no magnetic properties whatsoever interacts with a magnetic structure that has no electrical properties? We can't do that. What we do know is that every matter structure we've ever met has electrical and magnetic properties at the same time. And we know an electrical charge will interact with another electrical charge, and we know that a magnetic field will interact with another magnetic field. We know these things, but we've not accounted for it in our mathematics. So our description of the behavior that's going on and our understanding of the behavior that's going on is not complete.
Well, and then we're in agreement with that. I happen to side with Robert Destinti myself, but
I've been told
he could probably be simplified using Dollard's equations. I wish somebody would do that work, please. If you're out there and mathematically gifted, please do that work. However, but that doesn't change what the central discussion here is.
Yeah, but what we do know is that the magnetic properties of these particles are always in rotation, as are the electrical fields. And what we have is a circular structure that promotes rotational behavior. So the entire structure, even though it's sitting there solid and not moving visibly to us, the fields that are being generated are in rotation to each other. And they have to be in rotation with each other. You know, if I've got a spinning electrical magnetic field, it's got to be impacting the particles around it. And they've got to spin. They've got to spin in the correct way.
The magnetic field isn't spinning, it's stationary. The electrons aren't moving through
not
around
right.
that ring magnet.
Grace,
They're all
grace,
polarized, ready to move. That's what creates the field. When they move, when you spin the magnet,
why does
that's
the
when
light
the
circuit
electricity
switch on instantly?
Because I just told you, I gave you another reason that could be switching a solenoid underneath. It clicks a switch, which then turns on the battery because he does a jump cut.
Electrons. No, forget what the experiment was. I asked the question: why does
you just told me that it's all about the experiment?
Why does a light circuit switch on instantly when we know that the electrons travel?
I just told you why. I think
it takes hours for the electron to physically go around the circuit to get back. You know, the light is at the end of it.
What are you talking about now?
Electron drift, right, is way slow. Electrons don't go firing down the line wire at the speed of light or anything close to the speed.
There's a secret electric circuit underneath the wood, man. That's what I'm trying to tell you. He's a con. It's a fraud.
Well, prove it.
You prove it. You're making the extraordinary claim.
No,
I'm not making
all
extraordinary
I'm saying
claim.
is we have something sitting there, and you're saying the hands are in the position of a magician, so he's playing a trick. Well, he's public.
I think that he's probably a fraudster. Yes, I mean the evidence is
overwhelming. He's not the only guy who's done these things, right?
Exactly. That's the thing that scares me is that we're in the age of the Enlightenment. We have deep fakes everywhere, and I think this guy's not a fraud.
Well, we're talking about an experiment, producing a device and showing that it's not.
I'll show you something I don't think is a fraud.
Let's make the whole thing out of clear plastic. I forget what to call it, but anyway, we'll stick it on clear plastic, and that way you can see if there's anything underneath it.
I think you absolutely should do this.
And the issue here is, if it's not a fraud, we have a problem with our electromagnetic descriptions, because nothing in standard electromagnetics explains why this thing should work.
Yeah. All right. Now this here is not a fraud. This is an actual experiment. This is a great experiment. He has it hooked. He's got it wired coming in, and it does lift. Okay, so this is an example. He's got it tied. Okay, this is real, folks. This is not a fraud. You can see everything that's going on. He's got it on a glass top. This is a very simple ring. There's no place to hide. This is electrostatic lift. This is coming from ground stuff. Okay, they want to call it ionic wind, but it is not ionic wind because there's no wind being generated. You can put a piece of paper under it. There's no wind blowing around here. This is Byfield-Brown effect. It has to do with the electric field of the Earth. This is how we know for sure that it is possible that the government is producing these UFOs. And there's plenty of also actual reports out. Secret things have been ferreted away. And we think the technology has been transferred in May from the Space Corps of the Air Force to the United States Space Force. China undoubtedly would have access to the same kind of stuff. Byfield-Brown has been around for more than 100 years. T.T. Brown should have won a Nobel Prize. He didn't. Look, there's no wind. Right? This is real. And what I'm saying is that other video is produced by somebody who's got something to prove. They've got some kind of agenda, or they just want clicks, which is probably the most likely thing.
Yeah, well, it's either right or it's wrong, and it's easily proven one way or the other.
You go, and I would trust you, or you can wait. You guys can all wait till next semester when my kids have science experiment. But here, you can see him attaching the battery.
This experiment that's showing here, right?
Can't do this with a pulley. There's no pulley. He's underneath the shelf. No pulleys.
Can you just stop for a second? This experiment has been done with wood and bolts and wire and all the rest of it for the last, since Townsend Brown, which is the 1930s, right?
Years.
Every
100
time that a university students have discovered this and they've gone out with, new look at this new wonderful experiment. The guys that come around with guns and threaten to blow people's brains out turn up and shut it down, because why? This stuff is being used right now in military devices.
Because it's classified information. And I just want people to know that it's there. And in fact, go ahead
There are
and
patents
modify,
out there that are that's in it. So
modify there is currently in I think it's here. Is it under engines? Where is it? Is it on quantum? EU research. There's an anti-gravity section. I think it's under other EU maybe. No. Generators.
Generators.
Gravity driven. Gravity storage. What do we have here?
Anyway, what I'm saying is, because we have misconceptions and assumptions that are not correct, we come up with a description that's not correct. And then universities have got into this view. The problem I have with university training is we go into a course which has questions and coursework determined by somebody who thinks that the answer is the one they want to use, and nobody ever questions whether any of that's correct.
Well, I agree with that.
And because of that, if anybody comes up with this stuff, the first response by everybody is that can't happen.
No, I'm not saying that because I was trained that way. I'm saying that because I can see that there's no electric circuit that is in the visible part. If there is a hidden one, that's fine.
There's wires everywhere. It's got to be collecting something. The reason why this thing is low.
Yeah, but I've done the maths on quarter wave planar, and this is not a precise antenna. There's no way he knows what that from a ring magnet. No, this is a video that was made for likes, and I do challenge you in a friendly way to verify, because I don't think that it's going to support. And I'm not saying that it doesn't mean your work isn't accurate. I'm saying that video is a fraud.
Well, if it's not a fraud, then I'm right.
If you're not a fraud, then cite it in your paper.
But the thing is,
on another episode of the Pulse.
The only way you can create energy this way, or create these sorts of behaviors this way, is you have to burn fossil fuels to produce electricity that you then use to play this game, right? You've got that other set of videos with a guy with a mobile phone and the LED light insert that's connected up to his mobile phone battery, and it works in the dark, or the light doesn't. If it's outside in the sunshine, it produces more volts. Right.
Are you talking about the gravity-driven?
No, I'm talking about the guy who doesn't like. He was in the Royal Navy of Britain and doesn't like the commanding officer structure because they're morons. And he's got his little pad somewhere in Croatia. Right now, the stuff he's doing, right? All we have to do is go and grab an LED bulb, pull it apart, and grab the LED part of it, and hook it up to a bloody.
Get rid of the fluorescent bulb, because just use a pure LED, no fluorescence at all.
And he's got breadboards with LEDs all lined along it, and he's got his his diodes and everything to do whatever. All you have to do is create that thing, stick it in a dark room, and if it produces volts, then he's right. Where's the energy coming from? The problem we have in the modern world is that if we're going to claim that this is grabbing energy out of the environment from the electrical generation systems we all use, how do we turn it all off? We can't turn off a single electric circuit that we are in, right? We can go to the power stations and shut them all down and cop the crap that comes with that.
I don't know what you're talking about now, because we can obviously turn off. So what are you talking about?
We know we can go out with a fluoro light under a 22,000 kVA line and 220,000 kVA line, sorry, and the light tube will light up, physically come on, and that's a plasma fluorescent tube. It will just switch on with nothing, connected to nothing, right? So if this system that is so fraudulent is being driven by a Tesla coil, then we need to turn all the power stations off so there's no Tesla coil that works.
And I want to be clear to people who are listening, that's also Gareth, the See the Patterns opinion, is that there's either a Tesla coil or some electric field coming in. I reckon actually, I think now I prefer my solenoid explanation.
Okay,
as
that's
compared to
fine.
jump cuts.
But you know, there's other examples that use spark plugs and God knows what. But anyway, the issue
Are they
here
raw?
is
Are there jump cuts? I mean, that's the thing. When you
I don't
make
know.
your video, let it stream. Get one of these cell phone holders like I have attached to my desk. Let it record. I'll upload. I'll upload hours of raw footage if you want. I'll upload as long as you want it to be.
Don't take hours of raw footage. All you got to do is prove that there's nothing else in the device. You know, do a scan of your room and
Yeah, but you want to satisfy mainstreamers. I mean,
Yeah.
you have bigger enemies than I do.
The mainstreamers don't know what they're talking about. Is my issue with the mainstream.
Well, that's why I just said you have bigger enemies than I do. You made enemies with the Royal Society.
Well, that's because they're walking around with status due to I'm an expert and can't prove it.
My enemies, the Chinese Communist Party, so probably my enemies are bigger. But I'm just saying that
there's always status. My definition for status is using money you have to borrow to buy things you do not require to impress people you do not like. And the people who get awarded their Nobel Prize have got a status problem they've got to protect. And if someone comes out showing that their Nobel Prize wasn't justified in getting because the whole process of what they supposedly discovered is false, do they have to pay the money back? So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we need to deal with there that we have a problem with. What we have to do is explain the process based upon the evidence of what we see. And the secondary problem we have with evidence, if we've got the camera there taking the picture, where are the monitors to show that there's a fluctuating electric field and a fluctuating magnetic field and all? Where's the rest of the detectors required to explain the stuff we can't see? And if we don't have a detector to detect the stuff that is there that we don't know about, how can we come up with an answer that this is how it works? We've got to be a little bit careful about, claiming that we recorded everything.
Hold on. You got to be careful posting videos with jump cuts and then claiming it's proof. But you don't have to be that careful when you make the experiment.
I don't know whether you watched that entire video, but the guy turned the entire thing upside down. But that doesn't prove that the what's in the middle of the wire wrap isn't a battery.
I didn't say it proved anything. I just said that I think that it's a con. That's what I said.
Yeah, well,
I reported it for fraud.
Well, all I'm saying is we have to prove that it's a con. We can't just say it's a con. And the way do we prove?
I didn't say definitively it's a con. I said I think it's a con based on my training, experience, and what I can see in the video.
Well, I'm putting it out there. Let's prove it's a con. Let's go and build this device and prove that it's a con.
Sounds good. You're the lead on that because that is your.
Well, I've got to dig out. I've got to get some extra bits, like a light socket for a starter.
And I reckon if you prove it's true, I'm still going to be skeptical, and I'll have to make one myself too.
Yeah, well, that's what. If we're trying to be scientists, that's what we're supposed to do.
There you go. The alt-stream
experiment.
You hear that, flat earthers and the ancient alien architect people? The alt-stream can be scientific. You can do that. Right. You can do it.
We've got a demonstration of how to do this experiment, and if you want to prove it right or wrong, you can go and buy the bits, and you can put it together, and it's either right or wrong.
That's right.
Right. You don't need to rely on some expert out there saying it can't happen or it can happen.
No, and people
can't do it yourself. And
this being a lively discussion, I will put the video, that video, in the description, and I'll put a couple of little links and things. People can decide for themselves if they want to do the experiment. I, of course, encourage you, always feel free to do the experiment. I have a number of experiments where I show that I do not think that the mainstream explanation of magnetism is sufficient. The concept of magnetic flux is extremely insufficient. Particularly, this is a very simple experiment people can do. You can buy that same ring magnet, or you can use a spherical magnet. It doesn't really matter. And that's one of the key things too, is it actually will not matter what the shape of the magnet is. And then you can hang bolts, and you can hang them, and then they come to a point, and then they'll have them touch another bolt. Now, according to the mainstream, that magnet is supposed to be passing flux through, except for there's no circuit here. So they're saying then the circuit is then it flows on the outside back to the magnet. Okay, fair enough. So what's going through is directed primarily by the conductor. So now it's going to a tip, but then when it touches the next surface, which has much greater surface area, it touches it with almost as much strength as what came in. And then it does this for several linkages much further than the magnetic field can go. That's one thing. And then the second thing is that the magnet is not being drained, supposedly. And yet clearly you can see the bolts swaying underneath and that there's energy being expended. So the mainstream explanation for how this structure is maintaining does not seem to add up mathematically or philosophically, conceptually. And that's an easy experiment people can do. There's other experiments from the Hawkins field guides that show you that magnets are not, magnetic field lines are not a real field line. There's no discrete jump. In particular, there's one experiment where you can take like a piece of very thin metal, like a needle, and you can magnetize it or charge it if you like. You tie it to a string at the central fulcrum point, and then you put it over the magnet, and then you can move, and you will see that will continuously move with the field. It doesn't get stuck in one place and then go to another place and then go to another place. So the magnetic filings that come and join together and make so-called field lines, that is not what's actually happening. That is not a magnetic current that is right there. That is a gradation of concentration of magnetic strength that is happening. And then there are these gaps, but there's a magnetic field continuously throughout the entire thing. There is no such thing as magnetic disconnection. There is no such thing as magnetic reconnection. Electric circuits can do that, and the magnetism we see in space is following the electric current. So I just want to make that very clear for everybody. You can do these experiments yourself. I've got the videos.
Just remember, in plasma flows that we see in space,
right,
it's both an electric positive and an electric negative flow.
Correct.
That's the first observation. The second observation is the electric and magnetic fields go from parallel to 90 degrees opposite to parallel backwards to 90 degrees opposite back to parallel forward.
They're chasing one another in a 90 degrees out of phase manner, and there's a counter rotation. Correct.
Yes. But the theory about electromagnetic generation says that the electric and magnetic fields are always orthogonal to each other. But here we have an electrical flow where the magnetic and electric fields line up and they're parallel.
You're not wrong there, but I reckon that this goes back to the same thing we talked about yesterday. I don't know if you caught this video yet, but we talked about.
I watched.
We talked about the problem of the imaginary number yesterday and the use of A plus BJ, and the problem with it is that when you foil and they're using that that idea of the alternating magnetic and field for the light structure. They're using it so literally that they're actually ignoring terms that would come out of that foil. And so DeCinti has shown that the imaginary number is actually a inverted rotated identity matrix, and because of that we can explain both the right-hand rule or Lorentz force, and we can explain the Birkeland currents. But I don't think that it's a big deal that the majority of people go around and quote only the right-hand rule. Many of them don't know about the left-hand rule. But I would say that it is a big deal for people to believe absolutely in the imaginary number without having really sat and thought, like, does this make any sense? And is the mathematics sensible? And I will verify. I went through the electrical engineering. They just tell it to you, and it's a hand waving. Okay, you multiply the A by C and the B by D, and nearly do the other two mix. And that, of course, violates algebra. So yes. Robert DeCinti is correct in this, and I would definitely recommend if people can join his Patreon and get his paper. If you know me
Okay.
personally, I will pass you a copy of the Vortex algebra paper. You can look at it yourself.
My response to it is there's a lot of mathematics lies in mathematics, and
Yeah, well, that's how we
And-
know it's not a language of God, right? It's a language of humans.
well, it's a language. Yeah, exactly. The fact that you can falsify it so easily, but it's worse than that. Our skill as scientists when it comes to mathematics isn't up to it. I've read papers and I've watched the equations, and I just get to the point where I just glaze over. And I figure that if by page 4 of a treatise of any kind, if I haven't understand that 4 pages and being able to follow it, then the paper's not worth reading because it's not well written. Now, that doesn't mean the ideas necessarily in the paper are wrong. It just means that they're not being expressed in a way that anybody can understand. And there's a saying in information technology.
That's a leap because you're not everybody, so you don't know that you're not anybody.
But all I'm going to say is there's a saying, and it doesn't just happen in information technology. A person with too much time and ingenuity can turn the simple into completely incomprehensible. And it's not hard to do. There was a piece of legislation when I was working for a government agency that this is the law, and there's an explanation paper that came with the law with that legislation change. And at the time, Microsoft's Word package sort of did, how many years you've got to have studied English to be able to understand the words you read. So I did that. I was having trouble with his explanation of how to apply this law. And I applied this test, and it said, to understand the paper that explains how you use the legislation requires 27 years of studying English.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, they're writing laws. They're supposed to be writing an 8th grade English reading level, and they're writing at a 20th level, and you need Latin.
Yeah, and it's like, if something's been written like that, you give up. You've lost the plot. It's got to be written for anybody who reads a newspaper and understands what's in there, and that's a challenge in itself. So what we've got is mathematics that we don't understand, that's so complex that very few do understand, and it doesn't do the job required. And the reason why it doesn't do the job is we haven't described the behavior properly. And it's very easy to look at some event and go, oh, I know what's going on, and explain it. Right? Maxwell's equations are useful in building electrical devices because in the main they actually do correlate to what we experience in the areas that we need it to work.
Yeah, we've done some fair income electrical engineering of society so far. There's wires everywhere, and I can't wait for us to be able to recycle all that.
Yeah, but what I'm going to say is we've done pretty good with a system that's wrong but close. It doesn't explain all the circumstances. But when we get down to building circuits out of atoms, it doesn't work anymore.
Correct. Yes, and that would be something that I would say a stage 2 society should be able to easily solve by then, or late stage one. Late stage one. We would really need to have that solved because we really couldn't. It may be even something we need to solve in phase 2 of stage 1, because if we don't, the question is, will we actually solve our pollution and other issues? I don't know if we would. We need
to fix it now because we're already destroying a world with.
I mean, phase 1 of stage 1 is a cluster right now because we're headed towards war. There's a lot of bad things going on. The good news is, I do have some good news, fellas, is that it looks like Aaron and I will be invited onto the Moon Society board. And if that happens, we can start directing them. And what he's giving me some inside scoop, the Mars Society board, you're going to find this really cute. What they've been doing for the last 10 years or whatever is all role playing. So they would get together and then they would pretend that they were on Mars. Yeah, I know. Yes. I know. It's cute, isn't it?
Yeah. So let's get you thinking in a different direction.
Yeah, I mean, that's nice. However, it has zero to do with engineering or anything. That's performance art. So hopefully we're able to bring some much needed technical IQ to these boards and maybe direct them. And I think honestly, some of these societies need to be rolled up into one, because they're all doing a bunch of haphazard things. But that's just my personal opinion. We as we go from phase 1 to phase 2, if we can avoid, just shooting down. It's one thing if they want to shoot down some satellites because there's too many up there, which I'd say that there probably are. I shudder to think how many have been fried by the sun and they're just floating around doing nothing, or technology is no longer compatible.
They got metal in them, haven't they?
Yeah, no, we should be recycling them.
We can create a extended focused magnetic field, can't we? So why can't we just suck the satellites?
Well, the problem is we really need to be spreading those out. They're a little too close to the Earth, and if we're really going to have a spacefaring society, we just don't need to. How would you like to be, survive the launch because you're on an electromagnetic railgun launching system, but then smack at 10,000 miles an hour, smack right into an old CNN defunct satellite from 1970 something or 1980 something, whenever CNN came around.
Well,
because you went to go visit grandma on the moon. That's
I don't think the satellite's the problem. I think the problem you've got is the acceleration your bodies are going to undergo as it goes along the electromagnetic rail accelerator.
I said you could survive all that. I just said that you could survive that, but then you run yourself in. Look here. You can still see my page, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so look here. Look at this. Okay, Russia did a thing where they destroyed one of their satellites.
Yeah.
And it made 1,500 parts come out. That is a half centimeter. That is a half centimeter of material slamming into a piece of aluminum at 15,000 miles an hour. Okay, you wouldn't survive that.
How thick is that?
We cannot have this kind of behavior in space. We just can't. We can't afford it.
How thick is that block of aluminium?
Well, that looks like a power sink right behind. So that looks like it's probably a 6-inch or 4 to 6 inch block. But I mean, just imagine that would go right through. That would go right through your little, vessel or shuttle. And that's a little half-ounce piece of plastic.
A half MV squared really screws up their day, doesn't it?
Yeah. And then so that way of getting rid of the satellites is not going to fly. It's ignorant. Well, it's just really, and that's the stage we're at. Ignorance is everywhere.
Yeah, so, but if we wanted to get rid of our old satellites, if we can pulse an attractive or repulsive magnetic field at the satellite, will blow it out of orbit.
Yeah.
We don't need to hit it with a laser beam. We just need to pulse it with a magnet field, like a probe type magnetic field, and just make the damn thing move. And if it moves far enough, it's up there because of electromagnetic reasons anyway. It'll just fall out of orbit or disappear away from the planet.
I just realized, fellas, I am late to a call, so I'm going to wrap up this episode.
Yeah, okay.
Thank everybody for coming. I'm going to stop the sharing here, and I'm going to stop the recording.